everybody, we are back. It is Taped on Live, favorite is podcast, favorite is channel, favorite is everything. We are back. You guys already know what to do. Hit the subscribe button, subscribe. Hit the like button if you like it. Hit the dislike button if you don't like it. Leave a comment if you like it. Leave a comment if you don't like it. Also, follow us on Twitter at the Mark John NFL for me, at BD Williams 18 for BD. All right. So today, though, we got a special guest. Since we're checking out the Steelers, you got the Steelers coming up, Christmas Eve matchup. Got my man Derrick Bell from SI.com. Steelers, check him out at Steelers_DB. Also, just check it out for DB because he's very good at breaking down corners and all draft stuff. So make sure you follow him there with draft season coming up. No matter what happens for this game for both our teams, we're like just looking 6-8. We're still kind of looking at the draft. I've been watching the draft all week. I know I'm supposed to be like, oh, they can make the playoffs, but the draft is on my eye. It's there. So I'm sure Derrick, you feel the same way. So
yeah, that optimism's quickly fading. So I'm the same way, man. I'm on the podcast every week. I'm sitting there trying to, be as optimistic as possible. But in the back of my head, I'm like, yeah, let's go watch some corners.
I'm the same way, man. Well, let's go watch some guards and some stuff and make sure I'm on top of that just in case, when they do lose a game and it's over. So. But I'm happy to have you here, man, so you can talk about some Steelers and kind of go over what, so fans can kind of get an idea of what they're going to see directly from somebody who watches, just as much film as we do on the Raiders. You watch just as much on the Steelers, so definitely have a good idea of what's going on over there. So, let's just start. Let's get it started off, man. Actually, maybe give us a little bit of background about yourself, man, before we get started.
Yeah, so I've been with all Steelers since the beginning of last year. Before that, I was kind of blogging and mainly just doing draft stuff for Steel City Blitz. Shout out to my guy, Mark. Joined last year. Our site's kind of taken off. We're part of the Fan Nation SI group. We routinely finish in the top 5. Even they have 140 different teams on that kind of network, but we routinely finish in the top 5, and that's something that I take a lot of pride in. Noah, our beat writer, he does a fantastic job. Steven does a fantastic job. So they do the brunt of the work for sure, and I just really help out with film room type stuff, more X's and O's breakdowns. Like for you guys that are fans of this channel, that's kind of more of my avenue that I kind of help out with the site. And you guys are really lucky to have Marcus and BD breaking stuff down for you guys, because every team does not have this type of stuff. And there's even traditional media outlets that I've talked to in the past that are really resistant to this type of content still in 2022. So it's kind of wild to me, but yeah, I love watching ball. I learn stuff from these guys all the time. So
yeah. That's when we come here, give people the truth for the film. Not everybody's gonna like it. You're always not gonna make best friends with the teams when you're out here breaking down and learning their plays. Right. And they're super secretive. They think somebody's gonna give away the wizardry that Josh McDaniels comes up with because I put his concept up there. Somebody's gonna figure it out. You haven't been running the same thing for years. So So
I will say one thing. I will say one thing about McDaniels. I haven't got the chance to watch as much film this week because of my work schedule, but just a funny McDaniels story. I once watched Josh McDaniels, I think, call Haswajuk on the Steelers, 11 times in the same game. So, not saying that Josh has some good qualities about him, certainly as a play caller, but he's one of those guys that I've always kind of known as, if he finds something that he thinks that he can exploit, there is not an expiration date on how many times he's going to use it. It was in the 2016 AFC Championship game. The Steelers back in the day were a really, really cover 3 heavy team, zone heavy defense, and he just spammed Haswajuk. They threw to the running backs in the flat. I bet at least 6-7 times. We had no answer at all, and I'm just sitting there in my house, as a 22, 23-year-old, just wanting to punch a hole through a wall just because I was so tired of seeing the same play destroy us.
Yeah. Josh McDaniels does that, man. Because there's so many with the way the system is. There's options on different plays, and there's really no 1, 2, 3, 4 progression read. It's more, what the defense, you're supposed to read it throughout the defense. So like sometimes when the Raiders are in their 2-minute drill, they'll run the same play, and Derek Carr will throw to a different guy and same exact concept, but based on how they adjust to it, maybe I'll throw a fade to Adams, and then I'll come back and I'll throw it up the middle of the Moreau, and then I'll hit the check down, all the same play. But it's, that's how the offense is. So that's the cool thing I like about it. The only thing I don't like about it, and I'm not gonna get into Josh McDaniels' complaint, is that I see like Brian DeBall and like all these other guys running the cooler version of it, and I'm just like, it's like I'm like the guy in the SpongeBob meme, just watching Brian DeBall run like a cooler version of it.
Right. Yeah, I know. I was going through. I was just looking at some numbers last night while I had some downtime at work, and I was just thinking about my guy Hunter Renfrow coming back in the lineup, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, please, I hope they don't put him on these juke routes over the middle of the field. Like I'll be having Wes Welker flashbacks, Julian Edelman flashbacks.
yeah, for sure. All right, man. So let's get into the offense a little bit. We got Kenny Pickett, of course. I mean, he announced that he's going to start again, coming off a little bit of his injury, I guess, a concussion, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's his second one in a matter of like 6-7 weeks. So a little scary on that part of it.
Yeah. So, give your opening thoughts on him. I know that you've, we talked about him, just some kind of like, some mechanical stuff and some reading the field stuff just on the side. So give your thoughts on Kenny Pickett and, his outlook so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, things got off to a little bit of a bumpy start. They played a lot of really tough defenses, Buffalo, Philadelphia, teams that gave them a lot of problems, and, just teams that the Steelers weren't ready to compete with. And that showed, with Pickett. He had kind of a nightmarish game against Philly where everything just kind of fell apart for him. Didn't see the field well, wasn't accurate, really missed a lot of easy throws. And then they headed into the bye week. Luckily, that was kind of a get right moment for the Steelers offense. What they've done is they tried to simplify things even more for him, and they found a running game. So instead of him throwing the ball, 45, 50 times like he was before the bye and just putting a lot on his shoulders, they've kind of reduced his exposure to defenses, which has helped. And since then, he's played better too. And it's kind of like one of those things with rookies. Like you can only put so much on their plate before, their head just kind of explodes. And he's took better care of the football. He hasn't thrown an interception since the bye. So that's really intriguing for me. 3-4 straight games without a pick. Pickett's a really good athlete, and that's a lot of what he's relying on right now. He will scramble, even though he does bail unnecessarily out of pockets. He will scramble for first downs. He's tough. He'll take a hit. He's relatively accurate, really throwing to all levels of the field. The one issue that really he's had is access in the intermediate part of the field, like we've talked about, just kind of in DMs and just sidebar conversations. But that level of anticipation that you need to throw with, especially at this level without an elite arm, it's not quite there yet. You just kind of hope that, with more experience and more time playing the position that it gets there. But so far, it's about what I expected coming in. The numbers obviously look worse than you'd hope for, but I just think the level of play, especially over the past 4 weeks or so before he got hurt, it's about what I've expected from Pickett just as a rookie.
So I'm just gonna give you some question here. So you see him like 2 years from now. Do you see him as like a top 20 quarterback, or kind of like at least around there, like Daniel Jones, like at the bottom type of his floor kind of?
I think for me, and I've tried to explain this with Steeler fans are always asking me like, top 10 quarterbacks, top 10. Like I know me and you kind of have pretty similar feelings about this too, but there's really the three types of quarterbacks, in my opinion. You got quarterbacks that you win because of, and those are, your top 6, maybe 8 guys in the league, the elite guys that will always elevate those around him regardless of situation or circumstances. You have your win with guys, and that's usually the next, 15 to 20 guys that you can, as long as the team is constructed well around them, you'll get various levels of play. It could be, baseline starter play. It could be really high level starter play. Tua is a good example of that, in my opinion, this year. I've always thought that Tua was a guy that you can win with because he has traits that you can build around, that anticipation, the eye manipulation, things like that, and just the overall accuracy. But I've never thought that, he was going to be a guy to uplift those around him. But if you put him in a good situation, he's going to do well. And then you've got your guys that you win in spite of. And those typically your spot starters, your struggling young guys that probably aren't going to figure it out, or you're just backup quarterbacks filling in for that week.
Yeah.
I think that Pickett has a very good chance. Like maybe as soon as late next year, early year 3 of being in that second category. One of the reasons I wasn't as big of a fan of the draft pick in general, just because I did think that there was a limited ceiling, and I'm not sure that it's worth completely waiting around for in terms of, because I didn't think that he was as pro ready as some people thought. And then I just question, if we get to year 3, I think he's going to be a solid NFL quarterback. I just don't know is that going to be enough? Is it going to be enough in an AFC North where you've got to contend with, Lamar Jackson, assuming he's still there, MVP level quarterback. Joe Burrow right now is playing at an MVP level. And then we'll see what happens with Deshaun Watson. He gets back in his groove or whatever with Cleveland. It's just really tough to figure out a way to consistently compete with him unless you're going to be elite, surrounding him. And I just think it's difficult. I've always been a guy that, quarterback's most important position, in sports. So that's the guy that you kind of want to bet on the higher upside of things. But we'll see. I mean, there are certain things to like. Like you said, he's tough as nails. He fits, Pittsburgh, in my opinion. I like the mobility. I think he's shown some improvements in terms of pocket navigation, relatively accurate. He has great, like, intangible, leadership marks from, college leading up to this year. So there's things to like. I just think that the physical trait aspect of it, it's lacking, in my opinion, for a starter level quarterback that you're looking for.
Yeah, he doesn't have that arm for it, in my opinion. And he's late. So you're late and don't have a big arm.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, like, it's actually funny because my comp for Pickett coming out of college was actually Derek Carr with a weaker arm.
Yeah.
When I remembered watching Carr, it's crazy how everything comes full circle. So 2014 was Carr's rookie year, right?
Yeah.
So 2014 was really the second year that I got really big into the NFL draft in terms of, like, putting my thoughts out on Twitter. I wasn't writing anywhere, just putting them out. But I liked Carr. I love Devontae Adams. I had Devontae Adams like one of the best players in the draft, and he will always be one of the biggest hits for me ever. But Carr, I remember, like, when I was watching him at Fresno, he could do all these different things out of the pocket and, like, make magic happen at times. But I hated the way that he managed the pocket. Even back then, like, he would constantly, like, bail out. And just things like that. And it's so funny because I see a lot of that with Pickett. It's just hard to make a living like that in the league if you don't have a big arm. Those throws out of structure, in college compared to the league, I think that those windows are even tighter than necessarily windows that you see in the pocket. Like, everybody always talks about the game moves faster, the windows are tighter in the pocket. Like, out of structure, DBs at this level, they know how to plaster. When quarterbacks break contain. In college, I always just see so much confusion anytime a quarterback gets out of the pocket, to break the structure of the play. So it's just tough to make a living like that. And I think that Pickett's kind of found that out. But, it's growing pains, like, with rookies. And that's just what I've tried to keep everybody even keeled with, which is tough, sometimes with a fan base and quarterbacks. I mean, all about that. So
yeah. So because even with Derek Carr, if anybody listens to my quarterback podcast, I talk about this a lot with pocket presence, right? That, Derek Carr's pocket presence has got better, but it's gotten to, like, solid. So it's still going to be some times it just looks awful, but then it's just sometimes like, oh, good job, Derek. And so like, if he had terrible pocket presence coming out of college and he could only get to solid, like, you're betting on a guy with bad pocket presence to get better, to at least get to where Derek Carr got to, which is asking a lot because, I mean, even based on Derek Carr played as a rookie, he wasn't even supposed to be this good, to be honest. Right. So it's a lot of it is that growth of, can they get there? Do they have the work ethic? But it's never going to be good. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's a weird, the thing. And that's why I didn't like Zach Wilson. I was like, man,
he's allergic to the pocket. But yeah, Pickett, his first instinct, and you'll see him too. There's no doubt that you'll see at least one play of this on Sunday, but his first instinct when he feels pressure, not necessarily a blitz or just feels pressure around him, his first instinct is he will drop his eyes and bail out to the right. Because the funny thing is about Pickett, what made him I think a likable prospect to a lot of people was how well he threw on the run. And that was something that I thought Carr did really well back in the day, back at Fresno State. I thought he threw really well on the run. But Pickett's accuracy actually goes up. Like, he made a really good play on a 2-point conversion to George Pickens on Monday Night Football against the Colts, where you kind of saw that he kind of rolled out to his right and found Pickens in the back of the end zone. Pinpoint accuracy. When he's on the move, the ball is usually on the money. If it's he wants to go right, and then the ball will be on the money. It's just there's only been a handful of times this season where I've seen him, get pressured off the edge, and his first instinct be, all right, I need to step up and then out, or up to throw. It's always, drop your head, bail right. And like I remember us having the same conversation at the combine about, I don't know if it's about Pickett or someone else.
Yeah.
Those edge rushers are so much more athletic. You look at like the Max Crosbys and the TJ Watts and guys like that, Alex Highsmith, they are so much more athletic than anything he saw in the ACC last year.
Yeah.
So. You're just not going to outrun them. And he quickly found that out in preseason. There was a time where he tried to outrun Boye Mafe from the Seahawks. And I don't know if y'all have seen Boye Mafe run, but that dude runs like a gazelle at like 260. So Mafe ended up running him down and slamming him in the turf. And I was like, he's going to learn. He's going to learn. And that's just playing the quarterback position. You got to learn. You got to take your lumps.
Yeah, man, for sure. So let's talk about his connection with the wide receivers. Like, what are you seeing there? I know George Pickens has doing pretty good with the contested catches. Looks like a deep threat, but Deontay Johnson, he's been up and down a little bit with his hands, but he's always been a great route runner. So talk about a little bit the receiving core. I mean, talk about fire move. So
Johnson is the most frustrating player in the world. Whoever you guys think is the most frustrating player on the Raiders, Johnson is that for the Steelers. He does, the best way I can describe him is he does all of the very complex things and makes them look easy, and then all of the easy things he makes look terribly difficult. He is one of the best route runners that I've ever seen and studied on a weekly basis. Excellent job attacking DB's blind spots, really good release package, very calculated in his steps. His stems are always on point. He can get DBs turned around with ease. They're doing some interesting stuff. They don't have a slot receiver right now, so they're having to use him a little bit more in the slot, where typically that's not been his home. But they ran a lot of outbreaking routes with him last week out of the slot to pick up first downs, and that was kind of their go-to in third down situations. But Johnson, really good route runner, always been that guy that can create a ton of separation. There's few in the NFL that can do it like him. It's just the hands and the random penalties that he gets. It's just it's maddening stuff. And then Pickens he's played the Chase Claypool role from last year, where he just runs a ton of go routes, and he's just a lot better at it. And the reason is because Claypool could never track the ball, and he wasn't physical at the catch point, and Pickens can do that. Pickens is like number one in the NFL in contested catch rate. He has 9 contested catches over 20 yards already. He's basically just dunking on DBs. Like, if he's not open, you still should throw it, because 50-50 balls turn into 90-10 balls with him. And he's just going to go up and, high point the football and just dunk on guys regardless of who it is. So Marlon Humphrey, he absolutely was cooking him 2 weeks ago. I mean, even Humphrey admitted it. He was like, yeah, I was getting cooked out there. So Freiermuth's been really probably their best offensive weapon over the course of the season. Huge on third downs, and honestly their best player after the catch, which is kind of odd to say about a tight end. But he's dealing with a foot injury. His snaps have been reduced over the past 2 weeks. Didn't look remotely healthy. He could barely move last week. They tried to run him on like a stick and nod, and it took him like 4 seconds to run the stick. So I don't know how much he's going to play. He didn't even get targeted last week. He was kind of like a decoy. I don't know what that means for this week, if that ankle injury is going to be better or worse, but we'll just have to kind of see how that plays out.
Okay, yeah, because I know Pickens is a fan favorite for a lot of people, and a lot of people in Raiders fans, they wanted George Pickens. They didn't like me because I didn't have my top 10 wide receivers, but that's fine. Let him show me that I'm wrong. But I just like his release. Like, I always feel like if you can't get off the line, it doesn't matter how big you are, but he's obviously it doesn't matter. If anybody's around him, he's gonna catch it. So
he's very unique in terms of, I'm always a guy, separation is king for me. And that's why I've always stuck up for fans when they, bash Deontay Johnson. Just go like, y'all don't understand. Like, the reason he gets targets isn't because he's the number one guy, it's because he's always open. Like, it's always quarterbacks are always going to gravitate towards those guys that can just get separation. And we see that league wide, but like Pickens is really interesting because like he has moments where he can separate. He doesn't even run most of his routes full speed. If you actually watch the film, like there's a lot of like when he knows he's not getting the football, he's kind of just jogging. And that's the same thing he did at Georgia. But, you know, when he really wants to turn up and like, especially when he feels engaged, this was a big thing at Georgia. It's a big thing this year. When they can get him engaged early or when he gets fired up in a matchup, it's on. Like he's very, very competitive in those reps. And he's still got some work to do as a route runner. You know, Georgia, he ran 3 routes. It was a slant, a curl, or a go. And that's pretty much what he's running right now for the Steelers. They have started to run him more across the middle. But the Steelers they're dead last in every category in the 11 to 20 yard range. And anything over the middle, you guys don't have to worry. You will not see but maybe one pass thrown in between the hashes this week. It will not happen. It will not happen.
That's the
only way they'll do it is if the Raiders blitz. That's the only time the Steelers quarterbacks want to throw over the middle of the field is if there's blitz with man coverage behind it and it's a very clear picture on the side of the quarterback. Otherwise, they will throw everything on the sideline.
All right. Last thing before we get to the defense, which, you know, the Steelers defense, I mean, it's going to be cold. So we know there's going to be a lot of defensive played in this game. But there's also going to be a lot of running the football. And I know that's really what, you know, Najee Harris has been taking off. And, you know, there's some, you know, the offensive line, you know, have you talk about that a little bit? Because, you know, you watch some numbers and I'm tired of seeing offensive line numbers and grades. I'm tired of seeing
I've seen your rants on this and you're so right.
You're so right. Done. I'm tired of seeing that stuff. Somebody showing me something and I'm just watching something, like telling me what I'm watching is different than what it looks like. So talk about the offensive line and, you know, Najee Harris a little bit and, you know, how they're working in pass protection too, because we didn't get there.
Yeah. The offensive line, I would say right now they're playing average ball for the majority of the season. I think you could classify it as below average. Definitely not where they need to be in either phase. But since the bye week, and I say this with the caveat that like they haven't played the best defensive fronts either. But since the bye week, I think they've been pretty solid. They've done a nice job running the ball. Coming into the Ravens game 2 weeks ago, they were averaging like 164 yards rushing a game. That was a big part in them winning 3 out of 4 games. Baltimore stopped them. They ran the ball fine last week, not as efficient against the Panthers, but you know, they're a very zone heavy team. Split inside zone is their number one play. You guys will see it probably 12 to 15 times from various different alignments. They love running it out of 12 personnel, even though they don't really have great tight end run blockers. But Najee's played well. He was playing early in the season with like a metal piece in his cleat. And that was kind of limiting some of his explosiveness. He started to slowly get that back, and he's played pretty good football since the bye. Probably never going to be overly dynamic in terms of, you know, what people typically expect for a first-round back, but a solid back, and both of their running backs are good in pass pro. Najee had some slip-ups early in the season, but over the course of his 2 years, he's been solid. And their third down back, which is Jalen Warren, really good in pass pro as well. Just the offensive line's playing better. I'm intrigued by it. They need to still probably upgrade 1 to 2 positions in the offseason, but Dan Moore in particular, who will be going against Chandler Jones, he's had some good moments. I know Chandler's kind of picked it up over the past month or so, from what I understand. Chooks is probably the matchup most Raiders fans are going to be looking for, their right tackle. Chooks is really good about getting out of his stance. He will leave early, and you guys will notice that because I see opposing fan bases complain about him all the time. He will leave early, but he's got really good feet to get out of his stance. But is susceptible to inside counters. So that does worry about, because I know Crosby, he's a big 2-hand swipe, inside swim guy, if I remember correctly. So I am a little bit worried about that with Chooks because he's a little bit of an oversetter against guys that he think can beat him around the edge. So.
That's what Max Crosby's thinking right now. Oh, he's a little bit of an oversetter. Oh,
It's been on my mind all week because I'm sitting there thinking, like, you know, just from my perspective watching live Raiders games, I think that Crosby, just looking at the numbers and what I've seen of him, I think he's playing at, you know, Defensive Player of the Year level, and I have a huge amount of respect for how he plays the game. So, yeah, he's definitely the guy that I think the Steelers need to prioritize in terms of chipping him, giving Chooks some help. it helps with guys like him that don't really move around. He doesn't really move around, right? He's pretty much just stationary on that side.
Yeah. Which I don't like. I wish they would move him around.
Steelers do the same thing. So.
I wish they move him inside sometimes. I wish they'd have him rush. I mean, I think he's powerful enough at this point where he can take on some guards, and I don't think they would be able to hang with him. I think they should move him around more.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? They keep him on the right side, and he dominates over there. And I think that's more about stopping the run because he's such a great run defender. But he's a monster, and he's definitely going to be ready for that overset. Yeah. He's probably going to set him up. He's going to speed rush all first half. So
I can already see it. It's just spamming double swipe, like side scissors, 2-hand swipes, and then all of a sudden I'm getting a quick like 3-step drop sack on an inside swim move.
Yep. Yeah. Right in that first drive, third quarter. It's coming. That swim was coming. All right, let's get to this defense because I know that's a big part of even the big part of this comeback and them getting back to where they were after the slow start. So you start with the defensive line. TJ Watt. I know he's back. I haven't really checked. Is Cam Hayward playing? Cam Hayward, is he still out there? Yeah, he's still balling. So I didn't know if he was injured or not. Check that. I didn't see him on the injury report yesterday. But Cam Hayward, he basically got John Simpson cut. I'm sure that Josh McDaniels watched that film because what he did to him last year. I think that's why he got cut. Josh McDaniels did not like that film when he was going over John Simpson this year. So hopefully he doesn't baptize a new guard this week. So I'm a little bit interested in that. But can you talk about their defensive line? Because it's one of my favorites to watch.
Yeah, it was a weird season, man. They got off to such a slow start rushing the passer. They were like 30th in pass rush pressure percentage heading into the bye week. And then since then, it hasn't been great or as good as you would think because of all the names and the talent that they have up front. But Watt's clearly playing like not at 100%. But you mentioned Cam Hayward. He's the guy who has you would think that it'd be Highsmith, but he's the guy who's really taken off since Watt's been back. He's strung together back-to-back really good weeks. Last week against Carolina was the best game he's played all season. I think he finished with 6 pressures. He had some really high-quality reps against Brady Christensen and Bradley Bozeman. Bozeman, who I think is a pretty solid player for Carolina, the center. Yeah. But he hit him with the nasty, like, bull rush. They rushed him over the center. Bull rush, knocked the dude back like 2 to 3 yards, and then kind of hit him with this arm over move. And Darnold got to the top of his drop, and Hayward was literally on top of him. It was a dominant rep. And he's been a good run defender all season, but the pass rush just really wasn't there. It was kind of not there, which was weird because of how productive he's been. But then over the past 5-6 weeks, he's been awesome. As far as the other edge rushers, Highsmith, really explosive player. You guys will see Colton Miller's left tackle, right? You guys will see Highsmith. His go-to is speed. Both of our edge rushers are speed guys. Highsmith is explosive first step, speed. He will go ghost, dip, rip off the edge. And then his favorite counter that he will only use about 2 times a game is this inside spin. I think he's up to 11 sacks. I believe like 5 of them are off this inside spin move. So I know Colton Miller's going to see it on film. I'm just telling you, he will literally spam ghost rushes, spam speed rushes. And then the second he gets that overset, especially if the guard's not looking inside or outside, he will hit this spin move, and it is very, very quick. I mean, he's gotten progressively better. He did it a little bit in college. As a rookie, didn't really have a ton of success with it, but still was doing it. Year 2, he had some success. He gave Jonah Williams the absolute business both times that they played them this year, who I think Jonah Williams is a solid starting left tackle. He had 5 sacks in those 2 games. But yeah, and then TJ's go-to move is the cross chop. So a little bit like of what you guys saw with Yannick when he was with the Raiders. Cross chop, and he'll ghost. He's not a spinner really. His inside counter is more of a swim move, kind of similar to Crosby. They do kind of play a little bit alike. But he'll use 2-hand swipe. He had a nasty ghost rush sack last week on Taylor Moton. So, but the edge rusher, I mean, it really starts with getting pressure up front. If the Steelers do that, they're a completely different defense. We've seen that over the course of the season. When they get pressure up front, they're a pretty solid group. When they don't, that's where some of the weaknesses in the secondary kind of start popping up a little bit.
Yeah, because most people see me as a quarterback guy, but I'm also a big D line guy, man. I watch all the D lines because when
Same.
I watch the quarterbacks, I watch the D line too. And Steelers, Cam. That's why I bought Cam Hayward, man. He's just that bull rush.
That bull rush is generational. It is different. You'll see him, man. You'll see him. There's a clip from 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago, or no, it was against Atlanta, and it's one of the last plays of the game. Minka picked off a pass and to end it, but he's sitting there on the defensive line and he's literally moving he's like getting revved up with his back foot to go to this bull rush, and he just runs this poor left guard right back in Mariota's lap with it. Like he was just psyching himself up, like, all right, let's go. But yeah, he's an awesome player, man. Hayward's been a stud for them for a long time. One of their better draft picks, of the 2010 era for sure. So he's a joy to watch. I'm just like you. Pass rush stuff, that's been probably the thing that I've took the most interest in. I've always been a receiver, quarterback, DB guy because it's a lot of what I played growing up. But the defensive line stuff fascinates me, so it's nice to have some fun players to watch.
Yeah, for sure. All right, now let's talk about the linebackers and the DBs together. You got Minka back there. He made another Pro Bowl. Of course, Minka's a stud. I mean, he's always going to be a stud. I know there's up and down, maybe some PFF grades. Somebody will tell you he's not a stud, but he's a stud all the time. So we know who he is. Talk about some of the other guys around there, and what they're doing right now in the secondary and even the linebacker position.
Yeah, the linebackers have been really up and down, and they're not nearly as bad as they were last year. But they've actually got some physicality out of Devin Bush this year, which is nice. Okay. He's showing more of a willingness to take on blocks at the point of attack. Miles Jack's been okay. He's been banged up a little bit recently, but he's been all right. I would say that he's been their most consistent guy probably over the course of the year, even though, there's not really been a ton of like high-end flashes. Robert Spillane is their third guy. They kind of rotate those three guys in. He plays in the dime. He's probably somebody that the Raiders could look to exploit in pass coverage if they can get those matchups. But the Steelers do blitz him on passing downs too. In terms of the other guys, the Steelers play actually man coverage like the third highest rate in the NFL, which is different because, a lot of people think Steelers zone blitz, but that's really changed this year. The weakness of this defense, in my opinion, of what we've seen when they've struggled this year has been the cornerback position. They're starting Cam Sutton and Levi Wallace on the outside. When they're going into their nickel and dime sets, they're moving Sutton inside, which has been where he's played, a lot over the course of his career, and bringing in James Pierre, who's an undrafted guy. He played a little bit last year. The Steelers' corners just really lack athleticism. Sutton is like a baseline cornerback 2. Wallace really struggles in straight line areas where, they can. Honestly, Matt Collins kind of concerns me a little bit with that this week because I've seen him, at least when I've watched the Raiders, run by some guys that are a lot faster than Wallace is. Yeah. But they've been playing those guys more in man coverage, which I'm not sure is the greatest use of their skill sets. But we're going to see. I mean, Devontae Adams, I'm literally writing up a film room today and finishing that about how much of a challenge this is going to be. But wide receiver ones for against the Steelers have went off all season long. You look at some just monstrous games. AJ Brown, 3 touchdowns, like 167 yards. Jamar Chase had like a $140 on him or something like that in the opener. T. Higgins torched them for like 10 catches, 133 yards in their last matchup. Any wide receiver one has went just bananas against the Steelers secondary. So the one redeeming quality has been the safety play. Minka, I think he's been the best safety in the league that I've seen this year. Just a phenomenal player, elite instincts, elite range. The way that they use him, because they're playing more 3 safety sets with DeMonte KZ, they're moving him around a little bit more. He's not as stationary, just playing, back in the back half of the defense. And then Terrell Edmunds, I think he's one of the most underrated players around the league. And just in terms of the things that he can do, he plays slot corner, he plays in the box. He had 3 run stops last week against the Panthers. Just really reliable player. Doesn't do anything exceptional. He's a good athlete, though. And they ask him to wear a lot of hats. And I always appreciate those guys that kind of just do the dirty work without getting a ton of recognition. I try to shout those guys out. So I appreciate what he does for the defense as well.
So, I mean, back to the number one wide receiver. So you have, I mean, Devontae Adams has been seeing some crazy brackets. Some of the crazy coverages. I've been texting BD a lot this year because it's been getting exotic. It has, like, especially the stuff the Patriots did. They're doing cover zero looks without blitzing, so it was crazy. Some of the stuff. So have they not been doing those type of brackets on this type of wide receivers this year?
The only time that I've really seen them have a conscious game plan for brackets was against Buffalo. And you can actually look it up. It's easy to find. First drive of the game against the Buffalo Bills, they hit Gabe Davis on a 90-something yard touchdown. Because same thing of what Adams did in that Chiefs game, because that's a play that I'm using for my film breakdown. The way to beat brackets is just get them over the top. So all they did was put Gabe Davis. The corner was playing outside leverage, kind of in a Bell technique. Again, Steelers corner is just not overly athletic, and Davis is a guy who can really run on a vertical plane. The safety was a backup safety. He's not a guy that's going to play this week, but they tried to bracket him and Diggs on the same play, and Josh Allen was like, oh, okay, I'm just going to launch this ball to the moon and hang this ball, drop it out of the sky, and it hit Davis in stride. But the Steelers, honestly, they do not play very many complex coverages. It's very straightforward. If you get third and long, it's probably going to be cover 3. They play some man-to-man stuff. They are a lot more too high safety shells. They play a lot of cover 2. One thing that's interesting, they've played a lot of Tampa this year, although not as much late, but 3 of Minka's 4 interceptions have came off Tampa 2 this year. So that could be something that they deploy. I honestly have no idea how they're planning on stopping Adams. They haven't been able to stop wide receiver ones all season long. So to me, that's what do you got? I don't know if they're going to empty the chamber and come out with some new stuff. I hope that's the case. But if I was them, I would be clouding his side regardless every snap. And as much as it hurts now that, the Raiders have Waller and Renfro back, you got to let those guys eat and just make sure that Adams doesn't just completely take over the game because, he has a tendency to do that. So,
yeah, because I'll tell you this, Derek. I mean, Derek Carr is at the point right now where it is Adams or nothing. And I saw it a lot last game that the Patriots basically forced him at the end of the game to throw to other people. So if Adams has any one-on-ones, he's getting 17 targets this game. So I just hope you know that.
And that's really what really makes me nervous too, just because the Steelers just don't really have a good matchup for that. They don't prioritize that position in free agency or the draft. They've always been a team that builds their defense, from the front back. And, to an extent, I do appreciate that type of philosophy as long as you're fully committed to it. It's just the Steelers haven't had that guy that they can develop where they can deploy. Even the Patriots, they have guys that they feel comfortable in those situations. Even if you don't win, you at least feel comfortable. There's nothing there for the Steelers in terms of when they face these elite receivers, they just don't have an answer. So I'm interested to see what they do. If they want to play man coverage against the Raiders, it might be one of those games where they just play a lot of 2-man and just trail Adams. That could be a thing I've seen them do against some of the better receivers. Hasn't always worked out. But Adams is a guy I've always appreciated just in film study, not just dating back to my college evaluation of him, but just as he's grown as a receiver, he's so good at taking what cornerbacks give him. So there's nothing that he doesn't have a plan for. That was something I put in my film review. He has all the answers to the test. If whatever you give him is what he'll take. So
exactly.
And he's just an expert, just some of the nuances in his game, the late hands, the tracking, just the route running PhD level stuff that I really appreciate. So I'm not looking forward to what he's probably going to do to the Steelers on Saturday, but I'm well aware of what's going to happen.
I'll just tell you this too. The last team that really played cover 3 against him was the Jags, and they only did it for a half though, because he went for 10 catches and 146 in that half. Yeah, he played cover 3. So
it's weird, man. I've told people this on Twitter all year, man. I'm like, I don't think that they have the personnel to play the defense that they're trying to play with all this man coverage. And people are getting upset with me whenever Joe Burrow's going for 400 without Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon for most of the game. I'm like, look, dude, sometimes it's more than X's and O's. It's Jimmy's and Joe's, and we don't have the guys that can cover these guys. So
exactly,
it's gonna be interesting, man. I don't know what their game plan is, but I'm anxious to find out, one way or another.
you just got to hope that Derek Carr is just that terrible in the cold, because I mean that's what I think the little X factor is here too.
Mm-hmm.
Derek Carr has never really played good in the cold, but he finally has a wide receiver that has played good in the cold. Will that make a difference? Is that something that will happen? Because he can lean on Adams, especially if he does get some one-on-one. So
yeah, if you guys haven't ever been to like Pittsburgh, man, the stadium's literally on the river. So whatever they're saying is, the real feel. It is colder in that stadium. It is cold out there
by the river. I couldn't
imagine. I went to the 2016 wild card round when they played the Dolphins, and it was a negative wind chill that day. Oh, just frigid, man. And it's going to be like that on Saturday. So it's going to be interesting for sure. I'm interested to see how Pickett, throws the ball.
The
temperatures too. So this is I think it's a good litmus test really for a lot of, our prior notions, with Carr, some of the stats that have been thrown out in bad weather. And then, Pickett with some of the arm strength concerns coming out of college. I think it's a good thing for both of these teams to kind of figure out, what's real, what's not.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, man. I appreciate you coming on, bro. It was a great conversation. Definitely we're gonna bring you back on for some draft stuff. I wanted to get some draft stuff.
Super excited.
Like 40 minutes, but well, we'll talk about some draft stuff later, man. Getting some cornerbacks, offensive line, whatever we want to talk about. Definitely do that. So definitely appreciate you coming on, man. Like I said, everybody listening, hit the subscribe button, subscribe. We're out of here. Peace.